Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this episode for Women in Consulting. Today, we're going to be talking about branding for women in consulting. And I have the pleasure of having Ilan Cooley from Loudmouth Communications joining me here today. How are you today, Ilan?
I'm good, Corey. Thanks so much for doing this. I think it's so much fun and a great idea.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really excited about what you have to share with our audience as well, and for those who are joining us live, please feel free to join the conversation and to use the chat button and ask questions as well or share your opinions. Everything is welcome. Of course, be kind and courteous, right? And
Please.
yeah. So well, why are we doing this? There is a lot to navigate when it comes to marketing, as we all know. And if you don't know where you want to go, it is easy to get lost along the way. So the reality is, and what Ilana is going to talk about today, is that there is no cookie cutter, template based solution. If someone has told you that, like let's have a discussion with them too, right?
Yeah.
But a proper strategy is as unique as your business. And these are Ilan's words as well. So, welcome for everyone who's joining. I am Corey Davison. I'm your host at the Women in Consulting Group. And I started this group to help women who are transitioning from the corporate leadership roles into their own consulting businesses. And as you know, many women have been transitioning from the workforce and trying to enter into an entrepreneurship, especially over the last year, entering into an online world. So if you want to learn more about this, join us and you can visit the Women in Consulting group. I'll just share here. So it's at forexperience.com/WIC, stands for Women in Consulting. And you can join the group and have conversations as well. It is free. So we welcome you and hope you can join us soon. So today, as I was sharing, Ilan is going to be talking really about branding, and she brings a wealth of knowledge. She has been working for large organizations in the events industry, right? And for over 3 decades. So, Ilan, I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about, tell us something of the fun things that you have done throughout your career.
For
Because
sure.
it sounds like it's been very exciting.
I have been very fortunate. I started my career in media. So I worked with large media companies. So when I was first working in television and radio, I had the great pleasure of directing brand for the companies. And at one point, I rebranded a radio station. And then once I got into my own consulting company, I created a radio station in a major market from scratch, did the whole brand and marketing strategy for that property. And the primary focus of my business is working in live music and live events. And I work primarily with national brands, and I bring those brand strategies into the live entertainment arena and put them to work in with fans and with music and with musicians and properties. So I have a lot of great experience working with brands. But what I've realized, as you said, with everybody sort of having to transition or people who are getting into the space, the process is exactly the same for a large brand as it is a small brand. The steps are still the same. Being dynamic and memorable and trustworthy and all of those things is the same for every brand. So that I really am passionate about entrepreneurship. And we've talked a lot about that, Corey. And I think that there's a lot of steps that every business can take to be a dynamic brand, regardless of the size of the business.
I agree with you, and I mean, you have a really interesting perspective on brand, and we, just a little bit of background for those who are listening. This conversation starts sometimes offline, and we go like, "Hey, this should be live, right? I can't wait to share this with others," and that's usually how we end up having. I'm really just a facilitator of a conversation that is of interest to women in consulting, especially what I'm focused on. And so when we talk about brands, Ilan, many times, typically, people relate to it as a logo. That's the answer I get, right? Or some marketing campaign or something like that. However, as you and I know, this is just the tip of the iceberg. How would you explain brand to others?
Well, I always say that it's a part of the business strategy or the business plan that is often overlooked because people believe that it's sort of the creative thing you do at the end or the fun design element. But really, brand is about narrowing the parameters of what you are to your audience in the world of whatever area you're focusing on. And it involves all of the things that would, I guess, give you that edge and make you dynamic, stand out, but also define you in a very specific way. And those are the steps that are often missed. I do some branding workshops, and I talk about heart and soul and essence. Those things need to have some questions answered and the fundamentals determined. Otherwise, there's not a one size fits all type of a brand, which is why when we might touch on templates later, there's great templates out there, but unless you know your brand first, you can't decide what to use, and then you're just throwing whatever out there that really doesn't relate back to your core strategy, which is unique to your business.
I love that. I love that. Your heart and soul, right? It's like, how you do things. I really like that. It kind of brings, when we're talking about brand, it brings to mind that, in the corporate world, we usually say, well, your corporation has a brand identity. And you usually start thinking about if your company were a human, what would that look like, right?
Yeah.
And then now when it comes to the human turning into a brand, same
Right.
principle applies, right? It's like if your personality is a brand, what would that look like, right? And this brings a really good point where you brought in like one size doesn't fit all. And tell me about that aha moment that you had, in terms of branding and how it relates to your closet as well.
Well, and this is something that I think, we all get dressed in the morning. We put on the clothes that are in our closet, but I had won or bid on a wardrobe consultation that involved a personal shopper and a closet transformation a number of years ago. So an expert came into my house and pulled all of my clothes out of my closet. And then she made me defend why I owned them. And if they were outdated, if they didn't fit, if they were nostalgic but served no purpose, or if they weren't a good fit for my specific body type, then I wasn't allowed to keep them. So there ended up being like an 85% pile that got donated, and I only got to keep, a few core items. But then she took me shopping. It was part of my my package. And when we walked into the first store, she said, "Now I need to tell you something important because we've defined the rules of fit for your particular style and your body type." And she said, "There's only 10% of what's in the store that's for you. The rest of it is on the rack, and it might look good on the mannequin, but it's not for you." So when we were talking, that was an aha moment because there is no one size fits all brand. If you try to just, you go down these rabbit holes when you start looking into marketing and branding online, and then you get all these ads sent your way, and they're trying to like entice you into these things where you just use generic content. And I think that's really dangerous before you know what your heart, soul, essence, and your, the fundamentals of your own brand. So, we can look in our closet and we might like it, but I bet there's stuff in there that still has the tags on or some shoes that don't fit. So, we really have to apply that to our brand as well.
No, absolutely. I can totally relate to that, right? And many times it's also when we get stuck in the same style, for a while, and things are evolving, right? Or you evolve, right? I've certainly gone through those phases where I remember a time where probably 80% of my wardrobe was all Zumba wear, right? Because I lived on my Zumba gear and I looked like a bag of Skittles, right? That was part, and glitter. But that was really, that was like that part of it, like of my life as well, right? And it was part of my personality too, that I was just like discovering this part of me. And I see how it really it starts sending messages to people, right? It starts sending messages on what you're communicating. And then of course, you go to the corporate room and you're not going to be wearing Zumba wear there, of course, right? But it's like, so you suit the situations that you're in. right?
But
As a Zumba instructor. Yeah.
the essence of Skittles, Corey, can still be a part of your brand strategy, because you can tie that in some way without it being so overt. So I think people, like when you say the taking the person to be a brand, or the brand to imagining it as a person, we're all a persona if we're consultants, and that is the public facing side of our business. But we do, in essence, become the brand. And I have a couple of different brand elements to my own personal and professional platforms. So I have Ilan the Writer, which has a platform, and I have Loudmouth Communications, which is a corporation. But there's still the essence of me in there, but they have very specific objectives, and they have core values, and they have principles attached to them. And those might be essence of me, but they're not completely me. So we can weave those things in. They don't have to get thrown by the wayside, but we don't have to be, all Zumba all the time.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And I love that when you're saying, that it's like bring in all the different elements, right, of your brand personality. Consistency, right, is
Yeah.
finding what's your true the core of your personality, right, the core of your brand. Now that sounds easier said than done, right? So when we talk about strategy, which I know, brand strategy, it can be like scary, but it's necessary, right? And it's
Mhm.
oftentimes something that is dismissed. I'll give you an example. When I started For Experience, one of the things I invested the most was my brand strategy, right? Like I invested time before launching, like really, of course, having marketing background, it was easier for me. And I remember my husband saying kind of like, why are you spending so much on brand, right? Or on
Yeah.
brand, or so much in that. I was like, that's the core of of how I'm presenting myself, right? That's the core of my business. And but again, as I go back to that moment in time where I'm like figuring out how am I going to present my solution to the world? How am I going to present my business, For Experience to the world? And how does that relate to who I am? That was that consistency. It can be quite daunting if you're doing it on your own.
Yeah.
What tips would you give to a woman in consulting who is starting on their business on getting their brand strategy right?
Well, I think that looking at all of the different aspects of a business plan is important. There are tools to work through if you look up how to create a business plan, which most of us have done. I even, and you have admitted that we don't know everything that comes to, to do with market, even though we're marketing experts. I absolutely would suggest getting expert assistance if it isn't your forte. I take myself through the steps of brand strategy, but I still get help with things I'm not a master at, like the digital aspects and the design work. I hire that because it's important for me not to pay myself and waste time and money to do a terrible job at something. And that was some advice I got early on in my business was don't pay yourself to do something terrible. So if it's not your forte, maybe you should be good at your core business. We all are, because that's what we're going into business to do. But usually there's finance and there's marketing. So if you're not good at one or the other, you should have an expert help. I have an accountant. I have people who help with aspects of marketing. I still have business mentors, even though I've been running a consulting agency for 20 years. We're always learning. And I think this year has been a great year of change and evolution as we've all sort of moved into different formats and realized that we can expand with people further away from us because we don't have to be face to face, and we can share information in different ways, but we still want to do it well. And it's important to do it well. So there are resources out there, either, by looking into courses or hiring an expert, or really doing research that doesn't really involve clickbait. Because I think as soon as you get into the algorithm on searching for things online, you're going to be sent things that are sort of specific to the keywords, and you might just get sent off in a whole other direction that isn't helpful. So I think being mindful not to jump down too many rabbit holes would probably be my key advice, and then really map it out, because there's some steps to take. It's actually really fun work. But I think it is daunting, and I hear that from a lot of different companies and individuals that, because you start swimming in it, you get really, you tend to want to drown pretty quick as soon as it overwhelms you and that it overtakes you.
That's great advice. Yes, I thank you, Ilan. I think that is, and it definitely speaks to me myself too, right? Because it's in that process when are you ready to delegate some of those areas that you might be knowledgeable about it, but it really is. I love what you said. It's like, don't pay yourself, right, for doing a crappy job. Yeah, just because you think you can be dangerous about it, right? Like you can do. Yeah.
Well, but that doesn't mean that there's not aspects of it that you can do it yourself. Like I have just created two subcategories of my loudmouth business that have involve event management work. But because Loudmouth Communications is a communications and marketing agency, I wanted those specific event properties to have their own landing place. So I did brand strategy for them. And I creative directed the process because I'm knowledgeable about that particular part of things. But I still had the web design done. I still made sure that all of the other aspects were done professionally. So it didn't look like a website I was putting together myself, because I don't want that out there. I want it to look more professional than I can make it myself. And there are a lot of do-it-yourself things, but at a certain point, in order to put yourself above the competition and really not have that frustration level of, am I doing this right? Is this right? What is my brand? There's so many questions to answer that are easy if you know what you're doing. But like I say, I get a lot of help because I don't know everything. You can learn and then you'll know, but until you know, you're just guessing.
Yeah, so that's great advice. It's really interesting. It sounds like you're saying focus on your superpower, right? Like do the things that you do them great, and then lead them to the place that you can then delegate to, the expert, right? Like those who do it better than yours.
Of course.
Right? Like build your team around it, right?
Yeah, and that's even better, because then you're not alone. And if we're working in solo entrepreneur environments, we do end up being isolated. Even before this last year happened, I'm in my 19th year of owning my company, and it's a dynamic industry. I work with large scale live events that have 90,000 people at them. They might not be happening today, but they've happened for the last 19 years.
You're giving me nostalgia right now.
Very exciting.
I'm like, I can't wait.
I still sit in this office 98% of the time, all year, every year, because this is where all the planning happens and this is where all the calls happen. I still have to do the business here outside of the fun and exciting part. So if we build the team around us and have, I was told by a mentor that it's like a safety net. Like if you know the people that you can count on and you have the extra skill sets beneath you, you won't really fall. You'll have just extra support and you'll be able to bounce back up if you need some help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're speaking my language, because this is the power of collaboration, right? And the power of strengthening each other. And that's what what this Women in Consulting group is like. Okay, don't feel alone. You don't have to do this all alone, right? And you mentioned something that we wanted to touch on as well, is the pitfalls, right, of templates, right? And when you fall in that rabbit hole of the next best thing and the next best platform, and what is your advice in regards to identifying what suits you the best?
Well, that comes down, like, I don't know, when you learn to bowl, you do a lot of gutter balls at the beginning, like you're not going to pick up your bowling ball and hit a strike every time. So, putting the bumpers up at the beginning of the process and figuring out what your parameters are, I think is really important. Like a lot of people just want to go and, bowl a perfect game right out the gate, but it's not the reality of business. We're still going to be these evolving creatures all along. And something that exists now that didn't exist when I started, because, it's like, I feel like I started 100 years ago because of all the technology that's, evolved. All of those tools are great tools, but you're not going to use all the tools all the time. And in reality, there's so many different choices that I hear this most from entrepreneurs. They're like, they get actually like panic overwhelmed by the template stuff, because once you start looking into it, that's all you get thrown at you. And then you think, well, I should be doing what that person's doing, or, you know, this looks really good. But if you have your strategy defined up front, then you just like really narrowly, just like that closet advice, you know, you want a good fit, you want the right style, you want to be doing things that really match the essence of your business. And that means like 10% of it's going to be for you. But if you don't know which 10%, then you're going to end up being frustrated and you will feel overwhelmed. So you kind of got to go back to the basics. If you ever get overwhelmed, it's because you haven't probably covered all the other things beforehand. The overwhelmed feeling is like swimming in it. And the confidence of making those choices, you know, so that you're not like, you're wearing the outfit, it's not wearing you.
Yes.
Is that you've made good decisions beforehand, and then you can just go and pick the things that work. They're wonderful tools, but not every tool's for you. And that's the real, like the important lesson, is not feeling like you should do it all or all at once.
Yes.
Over accessorizing maybe is the good
Over
enough.
accessorizing, yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, likely it's best to start small, right? You know, to limit it and then grow.
Yeah.
Getting to the big, you know, all of the accessories, right? And then figuring out what to do with it. Like it's more of like get the pieces that you
Yeah.
the essentials, right?
Well, I think you've done a great job of that, Corey, because not only are you trying to bring women together, which is part of women in business, which is part of your strategy, but you've added on lots of different elements, but they're cohesive to your plan. You know, you're talking to other women who have expertise in certain areas, and you're putting it out there for other people to hear so they can take it for what it's worth, but you're also turning it into a podcast, and you're marketing it on all your channels and all your socials and all of your business platforms. So you're taking your core idea and you're filtering it through the right channels so that it's reaching the right person in an effective way with the appropriate focus. So yours is a good example, I think, because you know what you're doing when you're doing all this, even though it's part of your business strategy and your marketing plan. It's thought out and it's consistent. And we know that you've spent time and money on your brand strategy because it's apparent, because it's woven through everything that you do. So I think yours is a good example too.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Ilan, for the shout out there. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And it's, you know, it's interesting because I've shared this before also in the Women in Consulting group, where for me, when you start a business, it's really important to understand why you're in business, right? You know, that's really, whenever you go back, and I relate to it with brand, is also you start with your why and then build from it, right? You know, start with why are you in business and how do you want to serve others?
Yeah.
And then came the second session, which was about, you know, business planning with intention. And this is part of the branding too, right? It's like having an intention and not just because it's other people are doing it, right? It's but also educating yourself throughout the process, you know, finding those advisors that can help you and be a constant learner. You know, always have a beginner's mind, because we can get so set into this is who I am that we miss the opportunity, right?
For sure. Well, and I just picked my own brand apart this past year because my industry was and is shut down. Live music isn't happening, and it's the core business that I work in. Luckily, I have a lot of skills and other agency services to offer, brand being one of them, because I work with brands so much and I always have. There's value in that. But I went back to the beginning because my company had rolled along really well for a lot of years without having, you know, a review and then a refresh. So I did a full brand refresh of my own business last fall, which involved a new website. It involved streamlining my own social channels. It involved reaffirming my core values and my pillars, and looking at competitive analysis again, which hadn't been done since the beginning, and a lot has changed in the marketplace. So even for an established company like mine, the work is still there to be done. Like if I was still using the same wardrobe all this time later, I would look outdated. And some of it was very relevant still, but some of it had to change. The platform really had to change because I was on a platform that wasn't loading properly. So it was really the tech problem more than the design or the fundamentals. A lot of it was still was able to transition content-wise. But yeah, it all needed a refresh. You don't want to be still, wearing last season's outfits or last decade's outfits when the world is moving forward, and we've got all these tools, so we can use them. We just have to kind of get ourselves there first.
That's fantastic. So I love this quote. I took it from our previous conversation where you say, how do you have a brand that is runway ready? Right? We have a few minutes here in our in our conversation, and so how do you? I love that analogy. It's like, how do you get like runway ready so that you can exhibit all the best about
Right.
your business?
Well, and that's why the fundamentals are so important. And I've talked about a little bit about looking at something on the mannequin and getting it home and realizing it's not for you. It really is about all of the steps and the mastery that comes before you go and make it look easy. And it's not an accident when brands are effective, memorable, trustworthy, or whatever brand attributes you wish them to have. That takes a lot of hard work, and major brands and small brands are constantly evolving to, meet the demand of the market and to be relevant to their target audience and all of those things. So when you're getting yourself to be runway ready, it's that you've done all the work. But honestly, in the brand process, and you talked about it's not just a logo, the logo is the very last thing that happens in brand strategy. But it's not just a logo, it's brand standards, it's how it's used, it's how it appears in all platforms, it's consistency, it's positioning, it's color palettes, it's fonts, it's making sure that you have all of those elements of your cohesive, look, feel, the heart, soul, essence all together before you ever go out there and show it to people. So you're not going to show them the practice outfit. You're going to show them the finished product, and you want to put your best foot forward because there's a lot of competition out there. But you also want it to represent you properly, and that takes some work.
Well, you're definitely an expert in that, because I can see all the wheels in motion, right, that go behind, an event planning and an event execution or marketing. And what better, analogy than is like all the work that you have to do to put that event in front of people, right? That relationship behind. And it's like, it doesn't just show up, right? You got to coordinate a lot of pieces to it.
Well, and I work with brands to help them put their front-facing programs into large-scale environments. So we have hundreds of thousands of people looking at their brand, and just because they do something online doesn't mean it will work in a large live event. So, we're even taking brand strategy from national companies, and we're targeting it even further and working with, me as a brand expert in live events to tailor it to that environment. It's really about tailoring it to all the environments that you're working in. But it's important. So I'm very passionate about that side of it, because whether you're a large brand or a small brand, there's a place for you. You just have to take the steps. And that's really, I think it's the fun part. That's why this conversation is fun, no matter what analogy we use to wrap it in, because the process is fun. And I'm sad that people miss the process, because they probably haven't realized that it was one of the most interesting and dynamic parts of their business plan.
Absolutely. Well, and it's so interesting, because I know that you're delivering some workshops, right, on brand strategy. So if someone is struggling, right, definitely reach out to Ilan, right, and learn about if you can tell us a little bit about the workshops that you're doing for brand strategy as well.
There's some of these conversations that I've had with people. Like, we've had a lot of conversations because we're kind of, we've got this window of opportunity to collaborate when everything's not moving as fast. So I've had a lot of great conversations with fellow entrepreneurs, or even people who are maybe already in the space or want to get into this to a certain space with their business. And what I realized was, even with some of my senior marketing colleagues, they are specialists in other areas of brand, not necessarily brand strategy or other areas of marketing, I should say. So I certainly could and can and have been hired by companies to do one-on-one brand strategy right through from inception to launch. But what I realized was that the collaborative process that we are so fond of in a workshop format, by taking a few people, not only reduces cost of delivering the process, but we can also check back with each other and workshop the brand with other people, like-minded people. So I'm currently working on a couple of different sessions with groups of different people, musician, artists, independent musicians, some authors, and then I also have a workshop that would be for any brand, anyone who's an individual, a solopreneur, entrepreneur, a business, or even getting into the influencer space. So it's all the same process, whether you're big or small. So I really feel like I wanted to make it accessible for people to go through the process live in a 4-week process or 4-week window, so that by the end, all of those steps are taken, and all of the things we would do one-on-one are touched on, and then at the end you actually have a strategy, which is really exciting.
Well, that sounds like a great purpose, and good luck with it as well, Ilan. I think it's definitely worth it. So for anyone who's listening, I'm encouraging as well to reach out, and also go to forexperience.com/WIC for women in consulting, and you'll get tools, right? I have tools that I can share with you, and if you're struggling on where to get started, or you want to connect with other like-minded individuals, that can help you, like experts like Ilan, definitely love to be that master connector for you. And but if you're struggling on like, where do I get started, go to the forexperience.com/WIC. And once you sign up, I'll send you a brand strategy toolkit as well, or like and it's a workbook to help you get started. And then you can have that conversation as well, and dive definitely into a workshop should that serve you as well. But thank you so much, Ilan. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I know that we were anticipating. I was anticipating having it with you,
Yeah.
and I'm so grateful that you're here, and for those who are watching or listening to this in the podcast as well. So I look forward to seeing you more in the group, and share your comments as well. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, Ilan.
Thanks, Corey. I appreciate it.
Okay, have a wonderful day.
You too.